Right, goodly number here tonight. So we'll be coming. May I sign the minutes of the last? 3.
Yeah,
Do we have no apologies, I suppose? Yes, good. And similarly, no declarations. Right, item 4, the annual audit letter. Mr. Adrian Benslin, present from KPMG. The annual letter, which, as I always say in the past, well, I have said it frequently, I'm sorry to repeat it, but I've said it in the past, it used to be a hugely important, highly publicised and eagerly awaited day in December when we received the annual audit letter. It was all in one go. This system nowadays, it comes in dribs and drabs. So nothing is a great surprise to us when it actually gets here. So it's got much lesser impact, but it doesn't mean to say that it's important. It's just as important, but it comes to us in the way that it does, which is probably much more user-friendly, actually, than it used to be. Adrian.
Thank you, Chair. The annual audit letter, as the Chair said, is a formal confirmation of information that you've already received and heard earlier in the financial year or subsequently. It's giving you formal confirmation that we gave an unqualified opinion on your statement of accounts, which means we're satisfied that the accounts gave a true and fair view of the transactions and balances of the authority. It also confirms that we gave an unqualified value for money conclusion, which means we're satisfied that you had proper arrangements in place for securing financial resilience and how you secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness. We also tells you that we issued our certificate in September, which formally closes the audit. So that's the point up to which electors can ask questions of auditors, and that process is now closed. And the final confirmation is that the fees we've charged for the financial year 2014 are as set out in our original correspondence to you, which is the same as the scale fee set initially by the Audit Commission. And that's really all I need to say on the annual audit letter. All the detailed information was primarily communicated to you in September when we presented our annual governance report to you shortly before we gave our opinion and running for a conclusion. So you've had the briefing from us already, as the Chair says. This letter is published by, it used to be published by the Audit Commission on their website, so I believe it's still published by the PSAA, Public Sector Audit Departments, on their website, as the one document that is accessible generally to members of the public. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions on the letter itself?
Just the thank you, Chair. With regard to level of impact, that's presumably to do with risk. Is that?
I think you're on to the next report.
Oh, is it?
We've got quite a lot. We've got quite a lot from KPMG. At the moment, we're just dealing with the letter itself, which is pages 9 to 14.
Right. Sorry, I thought I just led on to.
Yeah. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah, I've got it. Yeah, I've got it.
No,
that's fine. Thank you.
Just 9 to 14 at the moment. Anything else on 9 to 14?
I just wondered if we had any interesting questions from members of the public on the account.
We received none.
When you say they're accessible, how? Sorry, Chair. When you say accessible, so presumably is there a link on our website to this report? Is there?
So you should be able to find this report on your website.
Has that been tested? So has that been tested? So whether
I couldn't tell you now. We can have a look and let you know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know that if it is a potentially accessible document, you know, if you're outside and tested, could you get to it? Perhaps it's and will it tell you on how much traffic there's been, how much public, how many people have accessed that site?
That's the hits information.
So we could establish
anything on the website. We can find out hits
for this particular page. There's interesting.
Well, right, Richard, you have a go at accessing it.
Yeah, I am. And I'll report back.
And
If I can't, I'll give you a buzz.
and Scott, if you get the IT person to try and just send us an email around about how many hits they've got. Probably in two. Probably in
You might have one.
Can we
if I go on there.
Chairman, can we have a bit more than hits? Because Google Analytics will give us a lot more than that. Because it's
Really?
about dwell time, how long somebody stays on there. It's not just about hits, it's about how long they stay and if they read it, and where they go afterwards and what they do with it. So just having hits is almost useless. And we need to know whether they're unique visitors or return visitors as well, and the number of page views that they do. So there's a lot more information that Google Analytics can tell us, otherwise it's just a waste of space being told that 1,000 people hit it, as it were. Sorry.
Right. I mean, do you want to speak with the IT?
No, just tell them to give us a full range of Google Analytics.
Chairman, I'll take up that task. I don't know what information we can get, but rest assured I'll share with you what we can get.
That's fine. Good. Anything else on the letter? Thank you. The next item 5, the certification of grants and returns, which is pages 15 to 18 on our papers today. Just a single letter from John Gorry of KPMG, which Adrian, I suppose, will deal with as well. Anything extra to say about it?
Just that the annual audit letter that we just looked at deals with the audit of your statement of accounts. This report is about certification of grant claims and returns, which we also carry out. It was a requirement introduced several years ago by the Audit Commission, who realised that there's a process for informing members about all the work we do through the audit, but not really a way of summarising what we do in terms of work on certification of claims and returns. So they asked auditors to produce an annual report, and this is what is in front of you now. It's in a letter format because we've only actually certified one claim or return, which is on housing benefit subsidy in 2014-15. In previous years there were quite a large number of claims that we used to certify. Now there's just the one. So this letter just summarises what we've done. It tells you the value of the claim, and it tells you what we found, and it tells you how much we charged for the work. In terms of the matters arising, it's not at all unusual to find individual housing benefit cases where there are examples of under or overpayment of benefits, because benefits is such a technical area, and that's quite common across all the authorities where we carry out this work. To put it in context, we're referring to the matters arising to 5 cases out of 60 rental house cases that were tested. The amendment to the claim was in respect of incorrect classification, which is an issue that was identified in the previous year, and so in conjunction with the officers we carried out some work on that. We refer to a qualification letter, and that's the way of reporting to Department for Work and Pensions of our findings. Because of the complicated nature of housing benefits, that's the mandated approach for all auditors to follow, is reporting to DWP on anything that they find. So again, that's by no means unusual.
Thank you. You say that your sample was 60 cases. Do we have a feel on how many 60 is of the total? What is the total cases we handle?
The methodology we adopt is to initially sample 20 cases of each benefit type, unless there's a small population. So for rental allowances, we sample 20 cases. Where there are errors found, we need to carry out sampling on a further sample of 40 cases. I haven't got the information to hand as to the total number of cases in the year, but it would be it was certainly a number in the thousands.
Yeah. So you start off with 20, and then if you find some things, you go to 40. Presumably, if you find more, you go to a larger number, do you?
No, we stick with 40, but in terms of the way we report to Department for Work and Pensions, we extrapolate the errors that we find.
Yeah.
And they come back to you then and say, well, based on this, we either want you to undertake more work, or in fact it could result in a clawback of subsidy.
Thank you. Any questions?
Chair, just a quick question. I don't think I understood that. So if you sample 20, if there's an error in the 20, then you sample another 20?
Another 40.
Another 40. Oh, so it goes 20 to 60. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions? Thank you. And finally, item 6, the progress report and technical update, which is 19 to 40.
That's me again, Chair.
Yes, it is that page. 40. Yes, of course. Carol?
We're going to start on your page 22 of 56, which is the page headed up External Audit Progress Report. We're confirming there that we've completed the work on the certification claims and returns for the previous year. In terms of the current financial year 2015-16, we've commenced our work on the planning stage of the audit. We've had meetings with your finance team, with Roger Staden and her team, to talk about some of the detail as to what they're doing, what the issues are, how they are going to approach things, how we're going to work with them. We've also had a meeting with the Chief Executive last week to augment our knowledge of what's happening generally at the authority, to make sure that we are up to speed with that, so that we can take into account all the knowledge that we need to in terms of planning our audit. Our interim audit is due to start in week after next. We'll be here for a week looking at systems and controls. And that's really where what I want to say on the current year's audit. We're still, as I say, at the planning stage before diving into any detailed work. The rest of the report here is a report of the technical report and updates. I'm not going to dwell on most of the pages. I'm happy to take away any questions that you might have, or to try and find out more information for you. I'll just highlight 2 pages, page 27, where we mention new value for money arrangements. Each year we not only give an opinion on your accounts, we also give a conclusion on your value for money arrangements. The National Audit Office this year are responsible for overseeing and the work on value for money. They've set a new criterion, which we've shown on that page, with 3 sub-criteria that, as it says, they're intended to guide auditors in reaching their overall judgment. Our view is that the sort of work that we're going to do is pretty much very similar to what we've done in previous years. It might just look slightly different when it's arranged on the page, as it were, but our overall judgment will be really very similar to what we've done in the past. And then we mentioned on page 28 the new local audit framework. Authorities will have the opportunity to appoint their own auditors in a few years' time. We've just started flagging that up at our authorities, and Audra will present more information to this committee in due course. It's very early days at the moment. There's no need for you to take action straight away, so there's time to reflect on how best to present that information to you, and Audra will do that, say, in due course. I'm quite happy to take any questions.
Thank you,
Chair,
yes,
just again, this is very new to me. So each year you audit functions, the same functions of the council, and it's a rolling programme. So when you sign off for 1 year, you then start the process again. But before you start the same process, you just view the landscape to make sure nothing's changed.
Yeah.
But it's the same areas of business that you audit each.
Yes.
That's how it works. Okay.
Yes, because your financial statements cover the same activities of the council on an annual basis, so our audit is on an annual basis.
And this level of impact indicator here would be impact to what is that? Risk? Is it risk?
It's a sort of
What's it telling us?
it's of how much interest is it to you as a council and to a body of members. So this technical update here is primarily for your information.
Yeah.
As I say, it can be used as a source of information for you, or indeed for officers if you choose to circulate it more widely. So we're just trying to give you an indication with that level of impact that some things are
It's a prioritisation, is it?
Yes.
Of importance.
Yes.
Right. So it's a prioritisation of importance. So when we see green, that's really important, and we should be taking note. If it's green, it's important, but not so. Okay. Right, thank you.
It might be useful taking your first point, Richard, to remind us all, this is possibly for Adrian and possibly Scott as well, just to remind us of the audit cycle, because our meetings are in the calendar to fit largely in with the audit cycle. Now, I certainly much prefer one of you guys to explain it rather than me, but I think it's probably useful because I think today is probably the start of the audit cycle for the next year. We can see here that Adrian is saying he's commencing his work now on planning the 15-16 audit. So the work is now starting to audit the year that's going to end in April coming, 16.
Yeah.
So this is sort of day one, if you like, I suppose. And we end up with, at the end of the cycle, reporting back on what's been happening, which is the audit letter that we've seen earlier today. So today marks the end of the previous audit has been completely signed off. Members of the public can't quiz KPMG about it. It's on the website. It's there. And we now also today start the process on the next audit. So today is the anniversary date of the beginning of the audit cycle. Now, between now and this date next year, the cycle progresses. I'd much prefer one of you guys just to run through this as to...
They're slightly different in terms of the external audit cycle is different to the internal audit cycle in terms of the start and end.
Yeah, well, this is the external one, really.
Yeah, which Adrian could probably explain how that works.
Yes, in terms of the work we do on your accounts, because your accounts are based on the financial year up to 31st of March, your ledgers will be closed off at the end of March. Your accounts will be produced, and Audrey is working to a timetable to produce the accounts by the end of May. We are scheduled to come in and carry out our audit during June. At the moment, we are scheduled to report to you in September, at the September meeting of this committee, the results of our work. So, in terms of our detailed work, the bulk of it will take place in June at the final accounts visit. As I mentioned, we undertake an interim visit as well, and that's scheduled to take place in February. As the Chair mentioned, the planning cycle has started. We did actually effectively start it a little while ago, so there is some overlap between years. But effectively we are sort of getting underway and revving up the engine, as it were, at the moment.
Would you say, so there are distinct phases to this process? Phase one is reviewing the landscape, any changes. Phase two is the physical arrival of going through the books. So would it be possible, Chair, I don't know whether, to do a really simple idiot's guide for people like me? So the phases of the audit cycle, and then roughly the dates, so we can almost see where we are in time and space.
You will get precisely that information when we present our audit plan at the next committee meeting.
At the next committee meeting, yeah. Right. Good.
Chair, could I ask what level of materiality you go down to? What's the level of materiality that you audit down to?
For the 2015-16 year, we are looking at a level of materiality of around £300,000. We would design our procedures to detect an error of somewhere in the region of £225,000–250,000. So anything that's over £300,000 that we find as an error, we would consider that to be probably material and probably require an adjustment to the accounts. But in terms of course, we might find a smaller error, and we set a much smaller threshold, which we could allow, so a misposting threshold. We would discuss with officers anything that's above that threshold with a view to asking them to adjust the accounts if we find an error. So by the time the accounts come to you for a formal approval, they should have been adjusted for any errors found during the course of the audit, unless those errors are clearly trivial.
And is that for a single item, or is that cumulative?
We look at both. We look at items that are, if we find a particular single error, we'll look at that, but we also look at errors cumulatively. Yes.
But on a turnover of 10 million-ish a year, that seems quite a high materiality factor.
We're working to gross expenditure figure, gross expenditure of around about 30 million.
Of which we collect a lot of money for other people, not necessarily us.
But in terms of your income expenditure account, that shows that the money you spend in total is say roughly about £30 million per annum,
So
and that's what we base our materiality
to
on.
the council, not county.
No, that's our expenditure.
And where would you report post-balance sheet transactions?
If there are any that need to be disclosed in the accounts, there should be a disclosure note in the accounts which would inform you and inform members of the public about post-balance sheet events. Either this have been adjusted in the accounts or that need disclosing, and it's something that we consider as part of our audit.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just so define error. So what would be? Can you give us an example of what an error would be? You find an error. So what would that be? Would that be a miscalculation? Some money paid that shouldn't be paid? What is it?
It can be a sort of a subjective term, but it can also be objective. So, for example, you've received some goods and services in March, but the invoice came in late from the supplier and hasn't got into your ledger. So your expenditure is understated by the value of that invoice. That's an error, and we can quantify that quite easily. We might, on the other hand, look at your debtors and say, OK, you've got debtors amounting to X £100,000. Are you likely to recover it all? No, because nobody does. So you need to make an allowance for the impairment of those debtors. How much should that be? And that's a matter of judgment.
Right. So if you judge
we might come to a different view from your accountants.
So error is different to fraud.
Indeed, yes.
And they can't be the same thing.
They could. I mean, the errors could arise because of fraudulent misreporting. Yes.
That's good. Thank you.
And then finally from me is accruals. How do we report on accruals at the year end? And how are they managed and cleared?
The accounts team will have a programme in place to liaise with service managers as to so the accounting team are told about any goods and services that have been received for which invoices haven't been received, and they will collate all that information and include any accruals in the accounts. Excuse me. There will probably be a threshold set so that they're not interested in maybe £20 here, £30 there, but they're interested in sort of larger items, and the exact amount of that threshold will be set by your accounts team. And as part of our audit, we look at we consider the completeness and accuracy of that rules figure.
And would that include dealing with suspense accounts?
Yes, we would look at suspense accounts to see are there material balances in them. Typical other tests could be, has the balance moved? Is it being cleared out regularly? So that is something we look at, yes.
Should on that, Chair.
Don't hold back. No, don't hold back.
Chair, can I also input on that as well, in terms of the sort of interaction that to avoid any duplication or crossover of the work that we do as internal auditors as well. We do a lot of work on the financial systems, so we will sort of get beneath the skin a little bit, a lot more than the external auditors. Their focus is more on things that may materially affect the accounts and stuff. And yes, they will look at the control environment, but we look at that in a little bit more detail. Certainly in terms of the key control areas like suspense and like. So we do a lot of that work, and obviously the audit opinions that come from that are generally good and reflective of the same opinion that comes from external auditors.
Do we have many suspense accounts?
There are suspense for most of the financial systems, but they're, as part of that, they're managed and monitored on a regular basis.
So can we define suspense account, please?
Suspense might be where income comes in and it can't be associated to the right account immediately. So into suspense and then further investigation.
Like a miscellaneous.
Miscellaneous.
Yeah, a dangerous area if you don't keep an eye on it.
Right.
Well, I think planning is one thing that when a plan application comes in, the money is put into a suspense account until the application is validated, or the money is given back to the appropriate person because it can't be validated. Typical example like
Interesting.
Can I ask a question, Chair? Yeah, sorry, I don't know whose remit it lies under, but when I read through them, one of the things that stood out to me was on page 29. At the very bottom of page 29, it talks about the whole government account submissions, including all the unaudited data. I appreciate that's for 2013-14, and there was 400 billion. This is across the whole of the UK. But it seems like a big job because it then says that 93% of authorities providing information, which means 7% didn't, and less than 70% of those use the actual inventory data to complete the return. I'd like to hope we're in the stronger part of this.
This is specifically about infrastructure assets.
Yes.
So this authority didn't report any because you didn't have any, or you weren't required to report any for that period.
Has that now changed, or are we still in the same boat?
The proposals for accounting for infrastructure assets are changing, not for 2015-16, but for 2016-17. Then councils will be required to report infrastructure assets in their accounts. The extent to which district councils have infrastructure is still slightly unclear, and it's like trying to pin down moving targets at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any sort of vague outline of what it might be required to contain?
So the types of assets.
Yes.
It could be if you've got any sort of interest in networked assets, and they're primarily talking about sort of roads, highways, footpaths.
Yeah.
A lot of that will be county council.
So it could be with us because if we're moving into this canal arm, then that could give us a new asset. Is that possible?
I think canals are being considered and are specifically excluded, but I'm not 100% certain on that.
Right.
Chairman, there are some bridges that we have as assets, and the SMT Senior Management Team in December we had a report on valuing and procuring the valuation of such assets, so it is something that's live in the authority's mind.
So we own bridges.
Some bridges, yes.
Is there,
Country park area.
do the same rules apply in the public sector as in the private sector? If you do a red book valuation on your assets, you then have to redo that every 3 years to keep your valuation live, and thereby there's a significant cost to keep doing a red book revaluation every 3 years. It's actually better not to value.
For the public sector requirements to value your assets, for most operational assets, to value them every 5 years. I think here investment properties are valued every year by your in-house team, but the requirement for operational and other assets is every 5 years.
Is that a valuation or depreciation value? Because there's a difference between an investment value and a depreciation value.
There are particular sort of valuation methods that are specified in the Code of Audit Practice and the guidance notes, which your valuers follow, and it's mostly based around sort of existing use valuations. But I'm not completely familiar to be able to give you a categorical answer on that at the moment.
Well, I know the parish councils value their assets on a regular basis, but that's more for insurance purposes rather than...
Yeah, but it's not a formal valuation as in what we're just talking about.
No, this is the thing.
The asset values have to be kept up to date, and there can be sort of an informal, what we call a desktop valuation undertaken in the intervening years. As long as every 5 years there is a full revaluation.
You specifically refer to the CREM as an investment property. That classification was ours rather than yours.
That was yours, yes.
And what choices did we have? I mean, is that the classic approach for let's properties as well?
The information presented to us for the crematorium was that it was primarily there for the purpose of generating return for the council, which is why it was classified as an investment property.
Yeah. So what are the choices of classification of properties?
Well, the main, for example, the crematorium, the main alternative was to classify it as an operational property.
Yeah. So this building is operational, is it?
Yes.
So that's the choice, operational or investment.
There's also surplus assets, infrastructure assets, what are the categories now? Assets held for sale. Those are the main categories.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
The depreciation replacement of assets, is there a sort of a guide as to, sort of what we're looking at long term and how much these things would cost? Because I guess new roads and things will all depreciate at the same period. So we know that on X date, that road or bridge or those series of bridges or whatever are going to need repairing or replacing sort of in one hit.
I can offer, just without going into the detail because I haven't got that by means, but the procurement exercise I mentioned earlier is not only about the valuation, it's inspection of.
Yes.
So it is looking at the condition, if you like, and what does that do in terms of value and therefore depreciation, etc. So that is covered in that same procurement exercise on the bridge structures.
Right.
But I honestly couldn't give you any more detail than that because that's beyond my capability. That's just to be honest about that.
The government has a scale of depreciation.
It does.
For lots of things, so I guess
It's the same thing. Okay.
Thank you. Good. Any other questions of Adrian?
yeah, I have, Chairman.
Yeah.
Well, just a couple of things to note really. I know that KPMG have been given an extra year to do our accounts for us because the 5 years was up from we were initially given 5 years to do local authority accounts when the audit commission was dissolved. Are you, in your audit planning, are you going to be looking at how you can do more for less, I guess, is the fee when you're going to be up with a bit of competition, presumably, in 2 years' time?
Well, for 2015-16, you're seeing a 25%, we've already said a 25% decrease in the audit fee, and a couple of years ago you had a 40% decrease in the audit fee, which was passing presence from the Audit Commission. So we have to manage our work within a smaller envelope. We still have to follow auditing standards. We still have to follow the code of audit practice set by formally by the Audit Commission. So there are standards that we have to meet regardless of the level of fee.
But I mean, there are other companies out there that do that, so I mean, in a more competitive market, do you think that we will be seeing a better value for money in the future?
I would assert that we give you value for money now. It's not something that we're complacent about, and we will always strive to give you a good service.
And the other two things, perhaps just to note, was that with the audit planning, that we're going to be looking at business rate inclusion in a year or two's time. We're going to be on page 36, and also now we include the Daventry statement of group accounts into the accounts, which we haven't done in the past, but now we're a full year on from there. We shall have to produce the Daventry State Company will have to produce their accounts
Yes, the Daventry State Company were included in the group accounts for 2014-15. And we're discussing with officers at the moment about the preparation of group accounts, and whether that still remains a relevant and necessary feature of this year's accounts. It's under discussion.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes.
Yes, Chair. I see on page 9, we spoke about earlier that smaller government organisations will have to, will not have their contractors there. Is there a role for DDC in also communicating this? And to parish councils, and also actually out of interest, what's an internal drainage board on page 9?
Page 9.
Sorry, do apologise. Page 28.
28. Yes.
Page 9, which is labelled technical. Sorry, stick to one numbering convention, I guess.
So is there a role for us also to help communicate that?
I know the parish councils are concerned, and they are aware of this, and I think advise to stay with their current auditors actually at the moment. What an internal drainage board is, I don't know. Anybody else know?
I'm not sure if that's any. It rather sounds like something from a kitchen. I'm not being flippant, but is there anything we need to be aware of with respect to internal
internal drainage boards are primarily in sort of the east of England, like Lincolnshire and the Fens, and it's for maintaining flood prevention measures.
So it's nothing for us to be concerned about in Northamptonshire.
I'm not aware of any really.
Historically, the government used to provide funds for drainage firms to drain farmers' fields to increase production, but that was kind of abolished generally in the country quite some time ago. That doesn't affect us.
Thank you.
Presumably KPMG will be pitching for parish council work.
I'm not sure it will actually for parish council work. It's not a market we've been in for a number of years. Generally, auditors appointed by the audit commission sort of stood back from the smaller bodies like parish councils, who were then free to go out. Perhaps it's on a cost basis. The smaller firms are just as well positioned to provide a service for that.
Right.
Reading the town council audit.
Anything else?
Just so the committee's benefit, just you can have an understanding of the relevance. I'm looking at page 24, Adrian. So there's a KPMG resources page, and it's about the shelter reports, fixing the housing shortage. The relevance for corporate governance committee first. So I can see in the other report, and some of them are under technical, where there's a link with financial systems and the like, tax base or whatever. But this one, I was struggling to see the link with governance. Is that just for information?
It's primarily for information, I suppose, because Daventry is not a housing authority, because you've transferred your housing stock some years ago. There is nevertheless an interest to you in terms of if there's an increase in, for example, homelessness that affects people in your district, then you could see an impact on the level of housing benefits that you are carrying out. And also generally in terms of looking at your 5-year supply of housing to take into account what is one of the factors affecting housing markets generally.
I think that might indicate, Chairman, in the future we might need to look at the content that goes into the report. And I appreciate your separation independence, but some of these matters are more for the council as a whole and strategy group, for example, in particular. And there are plenty of other reports out there that look at subjects like this. So I'm just questioning the governance in principle, particularly.
Chair, I can dovetail into that, because actually I was a bit confused in this section, because it's called KPMG resources, so these are basically reports that you have available, or services you could cross-sell, etc. Okay, so I think I agree with Simon's point, actually.
Yes, very rather secondary to our prime concerns. All right, more interesting. Right, any other points, Adrian? Good, thank you very much indeed. Tony, I think this next one is yours, number 7, Mr.
Members, hopefully, certainly members who've been on this committee for some time will recognise this in the report we bring to you on an annual basis. Really to provide an update on what we've been doing with risk management over the past 12 months and where we're going in terms, particularly in terms of the strategic risk register and the agreement and adoption of for the coming financial year. There is a duty on this committee to review the effectiveness of risk management as part of the council's internal controls, and this report will help you do that. Section 4.1 talks about the strategic risk register and the link to the corporate strategic plan and the medium-term financial plan. So it is assessing the risks relevant to us as an organisation and the priorities identified within the corporate strategic plan. The refresh review of the risk register starts with an officer group. We have an officer risk management working group which meets bi-monthly, and that will receive information from managers about risks appearing within service risk registers. So there's a feed up from what's happening in the services. Consideration will be given to those and whether those risks are managed adequately within the service, or there are themes or particular issues that we need bringing forward into the strategic risk register. So we've done that piece of work. We've then taken that on to SMT, who again has had a look at the strategic risks and looked at the assessment of those risks, and essentially the risk strategic risk register, which is part of these papers, is essentially a work in progress document. So it's been through those stages and is due to go to strategy group next week, and then on to council for formal approval. So we're not asking you to approve the strategic risk register. What we're asking you is to understand the process that we're going through and to endorse that if you are duly satisfied. So that is one significant part of that. I'll come back to the strategic risk register a little bit later and pick up the points that we discussed just before the meeting started, if I may. But going through the rest of the paper, member training, we offer training to members on risk management, on our processes, how we deal with that, how we identify and bring risks through into the strategic register. A session was held last week and a number of you attended that, and hope that those that did were able to attend it found that useful. Strategic risk register, service risk registers 4.3, mention those in the context of the strategic risk register. We have a service risk register which sits alongside each service plan, and this time of year we're starting the review of our service plans for the next financial year, and running the review of the risk registers alongside that. As I mentioned, any issues that come out of that process are fed through into the risk management working group. 4.4.
Sorry, can I touch on that 4.3? So that services, your operational.
Yes.
That's the operational side.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Chair.
4.4 talks about the risk management working group, its makeup, and essentially the work that it does. Aside of dealing with risk registers, we also look at audit action plans and do some monitoring there, and encouragement where encouragement is needed to deliver on recommendations. So that helps us understand some of the issues that are going forward. So essentially that's the key parts of the risk management process. The strategic risk register, as I say, this is a working copy, but it is what we're likely to put forward to strategy group next week. And I think that the point that was being discussed just before the start of the meeting is essentially about, if we turn to page 48 and look at the risk matrix, and essentially what we are aiming to do through the management and mitigation of risks is to drive risks from the top right corner of that block down to the bottom left. We won't necessarily, when we look at the registry itself, we won't necessarily move everything from amber to red to amber or amber to green, but we hope to take things on that journey in that direction. And for example, if we look at risk 1, where we have a inherent risk rating of B1, which is in the red segment. There are mitigations in place, and we believe we can move that then to C2. So still within the red, but it is travelling in that direction. So that's the general process as we go through. So we identify our strategic risks, we identify consequences of those risks, we rate the risks at that point, Then we look at the mitigations in place and review the risk rating on the basis of mitigations to give us a residual risk rating. Also, you'll note that the risks are assigned both to a risk owner, which is part of the management team, and a portfolio link for each of the strategic risks.
Just a point, that's really handy. There's that further sort of valuing of the risk. That B1 gives you further value. But when you get to where the colour and the letter and number are the same, if you look at point 3, you've gone from amber A3 to amber A3. So basically that says you can take out all your mitigation actions and you're at the same risk. So why put any? There must be a decrease if you put, because you might as well not put any mitigation in there because you're at the same risk. Does that make any sense? If you're not going to lessen it.
Yeah, I understand the point you're making, but what I would say, there is still movement within
A3.
Within A3.
Oh, right.
So if you go back, to page 48, and we look at the definitions for impact and probability. So we in considering the mitigations, the view is that either the likelihood or the impact would be reduced, but not in sufficient scale to move it to the next box. So it doesn't mean that it's not.
Given the audit materiality of 300,000, are these definitions in line with audit materiality? Because a scale range of 200k to 1 million or 1 million plus is quite significant if we've got a core turnover of 10 and a marginal turnover of a further 20. Actually, these are quite low-level risks. So what is the risk tolerance? Because some of these risks are talking about risks in the order of 25k. I think one of them gives you out at E1, which is fairly low risk, high value. But actually, is it high value? And what? Second question, and that's another one. I've got another one.
Right. Well, it's about proportionality in terms of what is strategic for us as an organisation, and also how the particular risk is assessed against our objectives. So some things will be of lower value, but still will have some strategic importance.
Because if you've got an E1 rating, which you have got an E1 in the green, well, it's very low, which is like 1 to 5%, but it might be a million plus. Actually, the risk tolerance of that is almost doesn't need to be on this sheet. So when do we archive risks? So that we're only focusing on the strategic risks, assuming we agree the definitions and probability.
Well, I mean, this is part of the process that we're going through at the moment. We have a major review on a three-year basis when we review the corporate strategic plan and a refresh in the intervening years. Our risk appetites are also set out in our risk management policy, so there's an opportunity to review those when that policy comes forward. But essentially, we could say...
The challenge I give to you and the officers through the chair is, are you doing a lot of work because we don't review our policy for another period, when our definitions could be asking you to look at risks that are so low, they're not material, and they're below what would be seen as a reasonable risk tolerance in materiality terms, and actually you're doing a lot of admin to deal with risks in the bottom end. I don't know how many other risks there are on the register, because this is only, I guess, the top end.
This is the complete strategic risk register, so we only have 10 strategic risks identified on that register. There's lots of other risks that sit on...
departmental risk registers,
yes,
and they pyramid file up to the strategic risk. But the point I'm making organisationally is, if this is the definitions across the organisation, at departmental level, they're still talking about risks in here that actually aren't material. The risk tolerance could be there, and we actually don't need to be registering them and doing the work to mitigate, support report back on? And are we not just creating a lot of work because our tolerance levels might be just a bit on the low side?
I was going to make a comment, Chairman. I understand the illustration entirely. When you look at E1, which was particularly cited in risk 10 there, the topic, failure of business resilience, is quite fundamental to any organisation. And the impact is catastrophic if it were to happen. So for that reason, if you like, it's right to be on our radar.
But the language and the values don't match. Catastrophic to me is not £1 million plus. Catastrophic to me is the £5 to £10 million range. And I think that's what I'm saying, 0 to 25k up to £1 million doesn't quite match the language. The numbers and the language, in my view, it's only a personal view, don't quite match. Catastrophic impact to me is that we have another Icelandic banks issue. How much did we lose there? Initially,
got most of it back.
And originally it was quite significant, wasn't it?
Some millions,
yes. So that was some millions, not one, and yet a 0 to 25k range is can this organisation stand losing 25k? Yeah, can it afford losing 5 million? Probably not. Not without a lot of heartache and angst. And that's, in terms of the words to the values, I just query that and whether or not you should just review it to save work in the organisation.
That's a fair challenge, Chair. That's the purpose of bringing it to committee, is to see if there's a fair challenge on what we use, because as you identify and as we recognise, it's all subjective. What we're interested in as well is, are we out of kilter with other organisations and the mind? So that's also something we have in mind when we benchmarking approach. But the challenge is there, and maybe it's something we take through the risk management group and you committee will have that view to see, okay, let's see if that's a little bit too low, for example. That's the purpose of bringing it here in particular. Is it robust? Question mark.
The specific question is the robustness of the definitions on 48.
No, 48 is just the page 48.
Yeah,
sorry, yes,
yeah.
Because that's the fundamental question, to save work and make it more meaningful.
Yeah. Do we compare with other authorities?
We're aware of what other authorities have got.
We also, sorry Chairman, we use our insurers to assist us with risk management. I think, again, harping back to the training session last week, the trainer there spoke quite positively about our process and about our risk appetite as well. So, it doesn't seem to be out of kilter with what others are doing.
Go through it. If I may, I thought it was a great point raised. I'd like to, on the back of that point, actually just bring something up where I have some concerns in terms of an area that I feel is a little lower than perhaps it could be thought at this time, and that's the risk number 4, page 46. We carry it down as C3 amber, and the terminology, I can see it was changed. Originally it says increasing service demand as a result of the economy returning to recession, but it's been changed to changes in the economy. I mean, looking at it globally right now, if you're a betting man, seeing the oil price slump to where it currently is $30 a barrel, and various other economies that are really tanking, this would have to be an area you'd have to really be very careful if you want to really protect your reserves, because any work you undertake, and we are looking at undertaking some quite serious challenges here in Daventry, this surely should be an area we should really highlight as something that you were talking about, areas of priority. I'm wondering when that particular area was last looked at in terms of, was it looked at quite recently, because obviously things change so quickly now globally, and whether that's one that we should take forward and just be very cautious around. Because it would be very easy to think that's moving in the right direction, but very quickly that could change in a few months.
Yeah.
I hope that's a fair point. Sorry.
So if I can respond on that, Chair. The changes that are shown on this document are proposed changes, which will go into strategy group. It is a recent comment that's been added. This process is, we're regularly looking at risk but essentially the review process of the risk register started in December, and is moving on at the moment.
Thank you. Sorry, did you take on that point about changes? So, it's obviously a tracked change that's been identified, risk number 4. So, am I right in assuming then that there are no other changes?
No, that's not correct, Chair. Unfortunately, they haven't come out very well in this particular document. I can point out some of those that I can see here, if that helps. Risk 2, there's an addition of words in risk 2.
And governance.
And governance has been added in.
That's in green.
Yeah, and that's really around what's happening locally in terms of other organisations and what impacts may be heading our way on in terms of things that might happen there. There are some changes. That's the one identified by Councillor Connors in terms of the risk 4. Are the only changes to the risk descriptions. There are a number of additions to consequences and mitigations, more so to mitigations and consequences. On risk 5, there's an addition of mitigation there.
Adjustment of plans?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see the colour. Now you mentioned the changing colour, it's just...
Unfortunately, the green hasn't come out very well on this particular print.
It's really crappy for you colourblind.
I'm not colourblind.
Anyway, an extra one on 10, yeah. Procedure notes, office instructions.
There's an additional consequence on risk 1 as I can see.
And a couple on 7, the last 2 on 7. I see, so there are some few alterations. Yeah, a few additions, and no deletions. But a few additions.
Additions, I don't recall if it was deleted.
No, so the deletion is marked by a line.
Yes.
Which was as 4. Yeah.
With regards to risk 6, the supply chain failure, the environment contract is probably the biggest thing that's heading our way, and that's a significant risk, to my opinion anyway, for the reasons stated. You've got it as low likelihood, and I just would query that perhaps.
In the work that we've done thus far, certainly the environmental services contract was considered, and some of the more immediate direct challenges to that contract have moved away at the current time. So we believe it is less likely that that contract will terminate early.
Again, if I may just add, if you look at 5.2, risk management is part of day-to-day business. These services, Tony's right, said, start at being live. We're constantly reviewing. We don't need a register to review certain risks. And that's out there, and we're on top of that one.
Colin?
Chair, thank you. I think it's going back just quickly on Councillor Patches. I think there's almost a difference between supply chain failure and supplier failure. I think your example was actually about a supplier failure rather than almost an entire range of supply chains. The point that I quickly wanted to raise, Chair, was come back to Councillor Bunting's point, which is regards financial impact. Because we have on page 48 on the table, you have the first 2 negligible and marginal, and there's actually an overlap there, isn't there, between 10 to 200 and 0 to 25. How would you be rated, for instance, if you were £9,000? Maybe there's scope for adjustment there to actually have one so they're not running concurrently.
Allied with that, is the overlap of 15,000 intentional?
So it's 0 to 25 and then 10 to 200 for the financial.
Just wondered if
Yeah, you're right, there's 15 overlap.
I wonder if it should
Separate those
be
out.
25 as marginal, 25 to 200. I
believe that's unintentional. Going back to the source document, so well spotted.
So 10 should read 25. Right. Oh, we've done something tonight.
So, Chair, just finally on that point, I'm not so worried about terminology as long as we understand whatever words we use, we understand what they mean, and because you know we would use different words to describe impacts in our area of business, but if this is a consistent line of terminology, then I think that it's fair that you keep it because you know what it means, and as long as we understand what it means, I think that's crucial, rather than just changing it for changing its sake. But certainly the values is another issue with regard to. But even that, if you know what catastrophic is and you think $1 million is the way that councils do business with regard to assessing that as catastrophic, then so be it.
Well, if we've got a gross spend of 30, a sort of discretionary spend of pretty well nil, and a normal income spend of 10, then I think loss of $1 million, certainly on the revenue side, is pretty catastrophic. I mean, we withstood the threat of the loss of 10 through the Icelandic banks, mainly because that was just capital. The only thing we were really losing there was the interest on the capital. We were able to account for it in other ways. And it all came back anyway, most of it. Well, our principal role here, and it's a very difficult one to distinguish between our role and that of strategy in the council, as this group, our principal role here is to endorse the risk management approach, which I would like to think from a combination of the presentation last week, and I'm distraught I wasn't able to get to that, and today's explanation, that we're reasonably satisfied with the risk management approach. The extent to which we take on board Nick's comments, interesting. Nick, your prime concern is whether there is significant work undertaken to deal with negligible risks.
Well, the reporting on, rather than
well, that's your prime concern, really.
Yeah.
Now, is that a question we can properly put to management on the basis that is management content that too much attention is being disproportionately devoted to small negligible risk areas? Are you content that that's not the case, that appropriate attention is being put proportionally?
I quite like, Chairman, your idea about, in terms of basic approach, that fundamental question has been asked of the committee, if you could go with that advice.
Yes.
The point being raised, I think if we rightly take that through to risk management group in particular, and we'll give it some consideration, because it's absolutely fair to raise the points, that's why we do bring them. I don't see it at the moment as substantive enough to alter our basic approach. That's what we're focused on here. That's okay.
So, any further questions? The suggestion is that we resolve the advice that we note and endorse the risk management process, and that the risk management group will consider Nick's point about proportionality and the negligible risk area. Happy with that? Yeah. Thank you very much. Scott, I think yours is the final report on internal audit number 8.
Thank you, Chairman. Most members will be familiar with the reporting at this time of the year, but for those that are not, this report includes our progress against the audit plan, in particular highlights to this committee any significant matters of interest from the audit work that we've undertaken up to the end of December, and also provides an update on those issues reported in last year's annual audit review, which came before this committee in June last year. That's the culmination of our year's work. In respect of the audit plan, despite changes observed in the staffing during the year, I've been able to partly utilise the resource of the corporate fraud officer as intended for such situations, and this has enabled me to keep the plan very much on track. From our current position, I am more than optimistic that the majority of the plan can be achieved still within the current resources. The only audit to be postponed in the current financial year is in respect of commercial rents, which was at the request of management for operational reasons, but this is intended to be undertaken in April as part of the new audit plan in any case. With regards to the work undertaken during the year, I'd like to draw members' attention to the table on page 51. Members usually find this table particularly useful in understanding the overall picture, and as I mentioned in the report, this acts as a useful barometer in assessing the direction of travel in respect to the control environment. As you can see, the table illustrates both the assurance opinions given to the completed audits over the last 4 years, summarised as a ratio, and also the percentage as an indication in terms of percentage of higher priority recommendations that have been implemented, and you can see the percentages there also with the targets previously being set by this committee. I am more than pleased to report to members that the current position remains very favourable at this point, and follows on from the good progress reported at the end of last financial year, in particular the percentage of high priority recommendations implemented, which you can still see is meeting the target at 90%. In respect of the completed audit work, you will notice that no minimal assurance opinions have been issued to date, and of the 2 audits of corporate significance, which are detailed in paragraph 4.11, both of these have been appropriately responded to by management and addressed in a timely fashion. In fact, the corporate health and safety audit is a particularly good example of internal audit and management working closely to identify the appropriate action to resolve the matters raised by the audit, and then management delivering on their promises with immediate effect, and also with the support from senior management teams, as these reports go to that forum as well. With regards to those matters which were raised in the annual audit review last year, this gives you a little bit of a progress update on those issues. And in respect of the audit on building control income, which received a minimum assurance opinion last year, whilst it is disappointing from my perspective to note that management have not been able to achieve a full reconciliation of income for the period covering 14-15 financial year, it would seem that the reasons for this are as was highlighted in our original audit report, and is due in the main really to disparate systems and records that were being used during this period across both organisations, those being Rugby and Daventry. However, Audra, who unfortunately is not present here as Chief Financial Officer, has satisfied herself from the investigations undertaken by her officers. There are, as she puts it, no material differences in the recording of the income, and has agreed, together with the business manager who is responsible for this area, that no further work is deemed necessary. Subsequently, from April 2015, the Council has moved into a formal shared service agreement, very much a different arrangement than the one previously. This now includes Warwick District Council as the lead authority, and assurances over that particular arrangement are being provided by their internal audit team as part of that arrangement, and a preliminary report has come back to us as management to suggest that similar problems should not reoccur. A further audit is also planned by them to take place in the summer. They're aware of the intricacies of bringing in new organisations and bringing their processes together, and they're looking to include those arrangements in place for both us and Rugby as well as part of that shared service agreement. But it is a different agreement, a different set of arrangements than that was previously. Wrapping up this section, I'm pleased to report that the 2 corporate-wide audits, which are also included in paragraph 4.12 on the review of the ICT strategy and business continuity management, both of these have been satisfactorily resolved, with a revised audit opinion of full assurance being given to in both cases. So overall, we're in a good position. Paints a very good picture. If management continue to exert the same effort and responsiveness to the issues, and these are raised, and I've mentioned some of these in terms of the mechanisms for monitoring that take place, if they continue with that, then I see no reason why the year-end position will not be very much the same. I'm happy to take any questions that others may have.
Thank you. Yes. Anything from me? Anybody?
Just one thing,
Yes.
Chair. I wonder, Scott, whether you might, for reasons I won't go into, you might have a look in the future, in the coming year, into planning enforcement and doing an audit around that area. There's been a number of instances just recently that worried me to do with the governance issues of that area, so I just wonder whether you might have a look at that in the future.
I mean, certainly I should make a note of that for when we're coming up to our risk exercise, to have a look at that in terms of the audit plan. As you'll be aware, we've already previously done some work on the application and income collection process for planning. There's an outstanding action plan on that, which management are addressing. Linked to that, we're also looking to do some work, and I know the chairman asked me before this meeting, we're doing some work on picking up on the Section 106 planning obligations, which we've previously been brought to this committee 2 or 3 years ago when the arrangements weren't particularly well in place, and we're looking to pick up some work on the new SIL aspect of that as well, looking at those arrangements. Next month is the start of that particular project.
I will leave that with you then.
Excellent. Right.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Maybe it's my comprehension, but 2 questions really. For Scott, in terms of the levels of assurance, we've got these 4 different bands, and then obviously you've got your reporting. But then you said there's no minimal level of assurance, but then you talk about the building control income 4.12. Have I missed something?
Yeah, no, what that is as part of this report, yes, I've discussed current year activities, and we haven't raised one this year. The 2014-15, the 2014-15 work, which would have culminated in that report, that annual audit review that came last June.
That's the one that's featured in 2014.
And that is, yes, that's the building control one.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Just one check. Thanks. With regard to the prioritisation of your work, because presumably you're not a massive team,
no,
and you can't audit everything.
Exactly.
So, with regard to the vice chair's sort of request to, do you presumably have a risk register yourself?
Yeah.
Do you on how to prioritise what to look into?
Yeah, we have like what you would call an audit universe. We call it an audit universe of activities, and they will all be scored around a risk process around certain factors. I also then try and bring in, obviously, management's judgment of risk from the service risk registers and the strategic, and do a bit of an exercise around that. But you're quite right, we have scarce resources. I try and put together some kind of 3-year plan, but it's an annual audit plan process, and that will be part of the next committee. Our cycle starts from April, when we'll bring the audit plan to this forum, and you will then get a little bit more of an understanding of how that works. But it tries to use the systems, the risk processes that management are in place, but obviously it depends on the maturity of that risk management process and the level of detail that service risk registers may not go to in terms of the activities that we might audit.
If we as members identified an area which we thought this is quite critical for whatever reason, do we influence you by simply raising it with you? Is that...
It doesn't quite work like that, because some members have. in the past, and it's certainly, I'm certainly from this, and what's good to point out is that the chair and the vice chair have all of the audit reports that come, so they have a lot more detail. But in terms of them bringing things to my attention, that's all part of the consultation phase, and I will certainly, give those thoughts to our risk.
So the appropriate channel would be through this committee, through our chair to you. We wouldn't come to you independently. So
I probably would like it to be kept on that sort of forum in terms of,
I think that would be
yes, I think that would. I think it would be, because
you're right to have the ability to raise questions
Yeah.
as to whether something should be looked at.
So we're worried about this little bit of area of business with one order and then put through this, so we can discuss and then share that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That team
Good. Any other questions? If not, can we go to the recommendation or the advice that we resolve to acknowledge the audit plan process and endorse management's response to those aspects of the internal control environment highlighted in the report? Agreed? Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair.